Kant's aesthetics is the antithesis of Freud's theory of art as wish fulfillment. Disinterested liking is the first element of the judgment of taste in the analytic of the beautiful. Their interest is termed, quote, the liking that we combine with the representation of the existence of an object, end quote. It is not clear, however, if what is meant by the representation of the existence of an object is its content, the thematic material in the sense of the object treated in the work, or the artwork itself. The pretty nude model or the sweet resonance of a musical tone can be kitsch, or it can be an integral element of artistic quality. The accent on representation is a consequence of Kant's subjectivistic approach, which, in accord with the rationalistic tradition, notably that of Moses Mendelssohn, tacitly seeks aesthetic quality in the effect the artwork has on the observer. What is revolutionary in the critique of judgment is that without leaving the circle of the older affect aesthetics, Kant at the same time restricted it through immanent criticism. This is in keeping with the whole of his subjectivism, which plays a significant part in his objective effort to save objectivity through the analysis of subjective elements. Disinterestedness sets itself at a distance from the immediate effect that liking seeks to conserve, and this initiates the fragmentation of the supremacy of liking. For once shorn of what Kant calls interest, satisfaction becomes so indeterminate that it no longer serves to define beauty. The doctrine of disinterested satisfaction is impoverished vis-à-vis the aesthetic. It reduces the phenomenon either to formal beauty, which when isolated is highly dubious, or to the so-called sublime natural object. The sublimation of the work to absolute form neglects the spirit of the work in the interest of which sublimation was undertaken in the first place. This is honestly and involuntarily attested by Kant's strained footnote, in which he asserts that a judgment of an object of liking may indeed be disinterested, yet interesting. That is, it may produce interest even when it is not based on it. Kant divides aesthetic feeling, and thus in accord with the whole of his model, art itself, from the power of desire, to which the representation of the existence of an object refers. The liking of such a representation always has reference to the power of desire. End quote. Kant was the first to achieve the insight, never since forgotten, that aesthetic comportment is free from immediate desire. He snatched art away from that avaricious philistinism that always wants to touch and taste it. Nevertheless, the Kantian motif is not altogether alien to psychoanalytic art theory. Even for Freud, artworks are not immediate wish fulfillments, but transform unsatisfied libido into a socially productive achievement, whereby the social value of art is simply assumed, with uncritical respect for art's public reputation. Although Kant emphasizes the difference between art and the power of desire, and thereby between art and empirical reality, much more energetically than does Freud, he does not simply idealize art. The separation of the aesthetic sphere from the empirical constitutes art. Yet Kant transcendently arrested this constitution, which is a historical process, and simplistically equated it with the essence of the artistic, unconcerned that the subjective, instinctual components of art metamorphosed even in art's maturest form, which negates them. The dynamic character of the artistic is much more fully grasped by Freud's theory of sublimation, but for this, Freud clearly had to pay no smaller a price than did Kant. If in the latter's case, in spite of his preference for sensual intuition, the spiritual essence of the artwork originates in the distinction between aesthetic and practical appetitive behavior, Freud's adaptation of the aesthetic to the theory of the instincts seems to seal itself off from art's spiritual essence. For Freud, artworks are indeed, even though sublimated, little more than plenipotentiaries of sensual impulses, which at best make unrecognizable through a sort of dream work. The confrontation of these two heterogeneous thinkers, Kant not only rejected philosophical psychologism, but in his old age increasingly rejected all psychology, is nevertheless permitted by a commonality that outweighs the apparently absolute difference between the Kantian construction of the transcendental subject on the one hand, and the Freudian recourse to the empirically psychological on the other. Both are in principle subjectively oriented by the power of desire, whether it is interpreted negatively or positively. For both, artwork exists only in relation to its observer or maker.